This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to the Great Love Debate, the world's number one dating and relationship podcast. Since 2015, I am back here in the very fine studios of Pod Populi, podcast for the people. I am at the one in Scottsdale, Arizona. It is the full Scottsdazzle going on out here right now.
Scottsdazzle.
I always recommend hopping a plane and coming to the desert. It's very, very nice. So I've always been fascinated by people who are willing to share their experiences. They're willing to share their journey. They're willing to share their ups and downs, their pains, and all of that. And I have somebody in here who's going to join me today. She's very smart, not just in terms of her eloquence in talking about this, but in terms of being able to realize where she is in her journey in life and love, where she wants to go on her journey in life and love, and being able to talk about that almost while it's happening in real time. Now, she wrote a memoir, and she's not that old. I guess autobiographies are for old people. And,
I talked about this the other day.
I always say the difference between a memoir and an autobiography is a memoir is about experiences and an autobiography is about events. And the experiences are what make up a life, I think. Anyway, she wrote a book. It's called Piece of Work. She has a podcast called Piece of Work. She is, in fact, a piece of work.
We're all a piece of work, Brian.
As well as a work in progress. I always said my autobiography would be something like unfinished project.
Yep.
Danielle Tantone, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
What and when did you decide I'm going to start chronicling my experiences?
Well, I wouldn't really call it chronicling my experiences.
Were you a diary keeper?
I journaled. I've always been a writer. I was a journalism major, my first degree. And I've always been a writer. And I've always thought that real life is stranger than fiction and way more interesting. I remember watching Friends in college, and I would tell my roommates, I'm going to write a book about like a real life. And they're like, what would be interesting about this? And I'm like, everything's interesting about this, just the interactions and the things that happen and the relationships.
Yeah, I think everything's interesting. As I always say about a good podcast or a good book, that somebody needs to consume it and not just think that's you. They need to think that's me.
Exactly.
And they need to find a perspective that they can share. They need to see experiences that they can share. And mostly the emotions that like, oh, she's going through something similar to me. And there's a real solace in feeling I'm not the only one who feels this way.
That right there, Brian, is what a memoir does. A memoir is a story from a life. An autobiography is a story of a life. And so you don't necessarily have to be famous. You have to be someone who's experienced some things and who can process it and share it in a vulnerable way that people see themselves in you. Even if your story is completely crazy and completely different than anything they've lived themselves, I can't tell you how many people have read my memoir and have come to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I feel so seen. Like we have this in common, and we have and
some of the most popular memoirs are about women who feel trapped in a situation, and whether that is about a job, life, health, a relationship, because a lot of women experience that and feel that, and you have uniquely. And I'm going to give away almost your birthday. You're approaching 50. You have gone through this in your...
I just turned 49 a few months ago. Don't push
approaching
it. Don't
50.
Push it.
People are listening to this like in 2024. You went through, we'll call it a metamorphosis in your 20s. You went through it in your 30s. You went through it in your 40s. And I'm not saying that's necessarily unique, but the uniqueness, I think, for you is I'm really going to examine where I am now and what I want for the next 10 years ahead. You kind of divide your chapters up into decades.
It just worked out that way. And I didn't really realize that it worked out that way until I'm going through a divorce currently. I left my marriage physically on October 14th, 2023, which was exactly 22 years after the first time I got married. I got married on October 13th, 2001. A month after September 11th, 2001. And anyway, so that was 22 years ago. And, if I had stayed married to him, I would have been someone who had been married for 22 years.
Yeah, you might be
instead of who I am.
Right. And, but you could probably say that about anything. Everything's about, sliding doors and forks in the road and choices that we make. And
totally.
The best part, the best thing you can do is sort of move forward without regret. And the worst thing is, if I had only done this, said this, called them back or whatever. You have to move forward, but there's value in looking back.
Totally. And I've always kind of had a tension between those two things. Like I've love looking back. I love thinking about anniversaries of things. That's meaningful to me, that those dates and stuff. But absolutely, you can't go back. You can only go forward. And
So,
but anyway, wait. Let me go back. So what I was trying to say was, so I got divorced less than a year later. So right at the end of my 20s, the first time I got divorced. I found myself divorced, dating like crazy, kind of using that to fill myself up and keep myself busy. So I didn't go back to him because I was lonely. And then I met my second husband, who was a total departure from, very different. And
I think I read he was a virgin.
He was a virgin when we met, and he stayed that way until we got married, until our wedding night.
Okay.
And then he wasn't anymore.
But you knew that.
Oh yeah, I knew that. He was a
that?
Christian. He was a Christian. He was saving himself for marriage. I don't think I was exactly what he had in mind when he
you were
set out
divorced.
to do that. I was divorced.
I assume you weren't a virgin.
So yeah, I was definitely not a virgin. And even if I hadn't been divorced, I wasn't raised with that with that value. Not that I was like taught to sleep around or anything, but it just wasn't. I wasn't raised a Christian. I was raised Jewish. I was not, super.
He must have been so nervous that first night.
No,
you waited your whole life for this. How old was he?
He was fine.
How old was he?
He was 26.
No, that's not terrible.
No, and he was fine, and we kissed and stuff. I mean, it wasn't like we had. No.
Okay.
But anyway, the point is, so he was a departure from all the guys who only wanted one thing, and he was refreshing, and I did like that. And I also became a Christian and, tried to mold myself into this perfect Christian wife. And that's where I went wrong. You can't really, I tried to be something I wasn't, and that can only last so long. And
I'm going to defend the guys who are always accused of only wanting one thing. I say we also want one thing.
True.
I don't think we only
and you know
want
what?
one thing.
If girls are really honest, we like that one thing too.
I agree. So once you got divorced the first time, did you feel a need to quickly get back out, like erase it from your mind? That was a mistake. I need to do this right. I need to do this again. What was that process?
For me, my personality, especially back then, but even still, I've noticed, is that I'm a go-getter. Like, if I'm feeling a little lonely, feeling a little depressed, I go out and do something. Online dating was sort of new then.
Yeah.
I went on Match.com. I can't remember if there were any others. Oh, there was JDate, which was to find Jewish men. And I did actually. I have a couple of people that I met through JDate that I'm still friends with. In this
something to be said for that.
It didn't create a love match, but I have a couple people that I can think of that I'm still really close friends with.
So back up 1 second. When did you know this is a question I always ask the divorced people, and I think I told you this. I don't ask why you got divorced. I asked, when did you know in your first marriage that this wasn't going to be happily ever after? That it wasn't going to be 50 years?
Well, we were in Mexico in Rocky Point with a group of friends from work, and we were out having fun, and we got in a fight, and he took off his wedding ring the next day and left it in he broke his nose. First of all, he was the only one not drinking of the group. He bumped into a sliding glass door, like walking out to the patio while we were all out at the beach, broke his nose, and then he didn't want to go to a Mexican hospital, so he decided to take a bus home. And I was like, that's the silliest thing. And he decided to take off his wedding ring, leave it there with a bloodstained note that said, I won't be needing this anymore. I'm taking a bus home. And I was like,
because he broke his nose?
It was a silly dramatic. It was one of those, it was like a cry for attention. He didn't mean it, but I'm like, seriously, he's going to leave me in Mexico?
And throw away the marriage over that?
We were fighting. It was a silly fight. It was like,
oh, Jesus.
But really, I should have examined whether he was
well,
Dan,
this is
the rest of my life.
A relationship is a lot about crisis resolution. And if that's the way they handle it, that is a sign that maybe not go into your 30s like that.
Exactly. So by the time I came back home, was with him as he was getting his nose fixed and everything. He begged me not to leave. And I'm like, you left me. You left me in Mexico. Like it was already over for me. And that was really the icing, on the cake. It wasn't
before we get into your third marriage, your second marriage, when did you know that wasn't going to be 50 years?
That one was a little more complicated. We were married 9 years. Unfortunately, I made some very poor life choices that had to do with a little bit of like my always seeking for love. I had a little bit of for lack of a better term, love addiction when I was younger. And that because I became a Christian and I married this pure, amazing guy, I thought we just wouldn't have any issues. I thought that wouldn't, rear its ugly ass in our marriage because I was a Christian. I was saved. I wasn't going to have struggles with that. And it came up, So anyway, long story short, I was unfaithful to him. I told him about it because I am brutal. I can't be anything other than honest. Like I can't. I'm an honest person. I probably could have told him differently. There's so many things I could have done differently, but long story short, for 3 years we tried to make it work, and it just kept unraveling more and more. And that's all in my memoir. The memoir is mostly about. Did
you know that sex obviously was important to you? Going into a relationship with somebody who obviously wasn't important, but it was clearly secondary to their faith. That could be an issue going in. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that wasn't really the issue, and we had no issues with that. And for him, putting that, it's really not my place to talk about that. But it wasn't that sex was secondary at all. It was more putting Jesus before. I love Jesus, and you're not going to say I love Danielle.
His values, and saving that part of himself for his wife and not for anybody else.
People need that. I mean, people, a lot of times the reaction or the action that you get in a relationship is somehow you weren't getting what you need, but a lot of times we don't express what it is we need until it's too late because a lot of times we don't even know.
For me, it was, I think, a chase for this excitement. It was like a drug, just the excitement and the when someone new tells you you're beautiful, and so that was the drug for me. Was not necessarily sex. It was just.
I've been examining this for a while. A lot of women in their 40s, 50s are doing things that I can tell are an overt cry for validation, attention, almost like 17-year-old girls.
Totally.
With this, that because they're not getting it from their partner. They're not getting it out of their relationship.
Right.
And it kind of does make sense. And I'm like, oh, if her husband just told her that he found her beautiful, she probably wouldn't have to enter that beauty pageant at 56.
Right.
And
but honestly, in my case, in really all three of my marriages, that wasn't the case. It wasn't that my husband wasn't giving it to me in either.
It was that you weren't receiving it from them?
I don't know. It was definitely something in me. It was, but I think in my second marriage, the main thing was that I had tried to mold myself into something different than what I was to please him. I had to try to make myself smaller, make myself less outgoing, less argumentative, less talkative, because he was a very quiet, subdued, gentle Christian man, a wonderful man. And I just tried to be this meek and, serious Christian wife. And that's not me.
And so
that's
then
not who I am.
You're back out in the pool again at 39, looking
Yes.
at 40. So were you like, this is going to be different to date in my 40s, or was that daunting?
I didn't really ever think of it in terms of dating. After that marriage, yes, I dated a little bit. What was different about that time was I found myself in a series of different relationships, kind of, for lack of a better word, relationships, like flings. Reaching out to people that I had known previously, guys that I had dated in high school or college, like a few of them, not even just one. And the one that I ended up marrying is so I ended up marrying one of them.
And a lot of people do that too. They reach out to the familiar.
Through Facebook and social media really allows you to kind of reconnect with people in a way that's probably not natural.
So you got married a third time. How many times had he been married?
He had been married very briefly after high school when he was in the Navy, but other than that, for all intents and purposes, he had never lived as a married.
When you go into your third marriage, is it third time's the charm or three strikes and you're out, or what?
I used to use that phrase all the time. I used to say, well, it's either third time's a charm or three strikes you're out.
Yeah,
the
I think
verdict is out.
I think that you don't know. Now, there's two ways to look at I go back and forth on this. Say somebody's been married and divorced 5 times. Part of me likes it they're like a skateboarder who keeps falling off but keeps getting back on and trying to get it right. There's something to be said that you still believe in the institution and you do that. But then there's something that I think about, like, well, who are they marrying and why are they marrying, and are they thinking this through before? You could see both sides of it, and every circumstance is different.
Well, I rushed into it all 3 times for totally different reasons each time. And I won't do that again, that's for sure. I actually used to say 3 strikes you're out or third time's a charm, but either way, there won't be a 4th marriage.
Why would you say that?
Mostly just because I never saw myself as someone who would be married 3 times. I mean, you picture just this different type of person than who I am. I've always been a romantic. I've always believed in like love forever, happily ever after, and just the fact that I've failed at it already 3 times.
Failed is a wrong word, but we are going to get into
Nothing's
all
wrong
of
with
that.
failure.
Nothing's wrong with. We learn from failure. I got to take a quick break because we got to pay for not 4 or 5 marriages around here. I'm probably not doing that. I'm with Danielle Tantone. She is a piece of work, and she is the author of Piece of Work. And we will be back right after this. And we are back. I don't think anybody pictures themselves 3 marriages. I mean, some people do look at, this is a starter marriage, and there's a lot of school of thought on that.
I didn't.
Do you believe, though, that the love of your life is still ahead of you?
You know what? I really didn't, but I thought I was too old. I thought, I've had breast cancer. I don't even have nipples. I mean, I'm 49. I'm not nearly as fun or as cute as I was.
I believe you referred to them as the Barbie boobs.
Yeah, I like to call them Barbie boobs.
I don't think guys are as freaked out by that as you think.
They're surprisingly not.
I think we're just happy to be there.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's been anyway. I'm forever an optimist. But I will be very careful, and I'm going to take some more time to just grow and be with myself. I actually like myself for the first time in my life, and
going through the process of thinking back and chronicling this and talking about it, has that made you examine and you're less hard on yourself now?
Oh, definitely. I used to believe in a life of no regrets. I can't say that. I mean, there are some things that I would definitely like to go back and tell myself, don't do that. It is not worth it.
Right now.
But yeah, I
Vegas
think
is
that,
built on that.
like you said, I think I just listened to one of your podcast episodes, and one of the things you or your guest said was that you can't judge your younger self based on what you know now. You made the best choices you could given where you were at that point.
Or you made the worst choices you could.
Exactly.
And there's something, it's about, taking a glance to the past, try and absorb what you can, and then moving forward with passion and purpose. Totally. So if you believe the life you've always wanted, or maybe the life you now want, which could be 2 different things, are ahead of you, you can look at the breast cancer as a metaphor for you have been a survivor, and you survived mostly yourself, which I think we don't do that a lot. We're like, I survived bad relationships. I survived myself and my life, and now I'm approaching 50, and you're probably halfway, and now you can redo all the things you want to do.
And I think that's the difference, really, fundamentally, between an optimist and a pessimist. Is like, I've had bad things. I've had really shitty things happen to me last week, last month, last year, and over the last 50 years. But I do always see a silver lining. I always see the light ahead. I've just always been able to see that.
So you've gone back, you're back in the dating pool?
Yeah, plus a little bit. a little
Do
bit.
you lead with, I'm about to get divorced you're not officially divorced, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
I'm about to get divorced for the third time.
Well, I'm not on like a million dating sites. I went on one dating site for about 24 hours, and I'm not even active
somebody
on
bumps into you at Home Depot and they ask you out, and you're like, okay, I'm going through.
That has never happened.
Well, it
but
might.
Maybe.
And they're like, are you married? And you're like, I'm getting divorced. And, and then you're like,
I usually tell people I'm in the middle of a divorce.
But does the third time matter? It's kind of like we had somebody who come to one of our live shows, this woman, and she's like, I'm a widow for the sixth time.
Holy shit.
And I'm like, part of me,
my husband's dying.
right. And we're like, what's common denominated here?
Yeah.
But she's like, and I'm hoping for a seventh. And I'm like, I don't want to be the seventh.
Well, Brian, anyone who's spent more than 10 minutes with me knows that I do tend to drop all the bombshells like pretty quickly.
Right.
But I think I do that. I guess I don't want people to find out later. Like I'd rather just.
Well,
I'll
it's
tell
something
you
to
this.
talk
I'll
about.
tell you.
I think that I talked about this on a recent podcast. There's always this adage that you shouldn't talk about past relationships on early dates or whatever. I think we learn. I want to know what, where, why, when, why, because I want to see if they've learned those things.
Totally.
If people are just dismissive, like I dated a bunch of jerks or just didn't work out or whatever, that doesn't give me anything in terms of growth. I want to know that the other person has grown and that we're in a place where, because I think, once you get over 40, we all have relationships. And as my longtime, very wise producer of the show said, the only one that really needs to last is the last one.
Totally.
And so the last one, do you believe that
I really thought the second one was the last one. And then I really thought the third one was the last one. And it is hard to let go of that dream. That's hard. I mean,
why do you have to let go of that dream? And it's good in the moment that you think it's the last one.
When you decide that it's not, it's.
Yeah, but your dream is that there will be a last one.
Yeah.
And so that's what I want to get back to. You said, I will not get married because you're afraid that you would be a four-time divorcee?
I had said that in the past because I was not okay with the idea. I really felt some shame around the idea that I had been married 3 times. And I was like, if we do get divorced, I'm certainly not going to do it again. Like, obviously, marriage isn't for me. Mm-hmm. What I will say is that since then, I have opened my mind again. Not necessarily to the institution of marriage. I don't know that I would be legally married. I don't know that I would easily share my finances and my, everything with somebody again. Mm-hmm. But I hope to share my life with somebody again.
There is something to be said, though, that I think that for that person, and if you got divorced at 29, 39, and 49, I probably wouldn't be comfortable married to you at 58, But if you're like, listen, I have, touched this stove 3 times and I still trust this stove and I want to do that, there's something to be said, like, I know my mistakes and I know I've gotten divorced. I still want to try this with you. I think some people would be open to that. Not every guy would be open to that. Just like, the virgin guy.
I've been shocked because, like I said, I was 24 hours on a dating app, and I've met a handful of people organically, and I am a very open book. Like, this conversation is not really that unique. I've had conversations like this with friends, with all kinds of people, and I've been impressed with the guys out there. Honestly, like, I know most people just talk about how awful the dating scene is. I've been super impressed by the type of guys that have liked my profile and matched with me and connected with me, what they see in me. Like, I'm like,
and they're not judgmental.
I know, some of them,
they might not need nipples,
And that doesn't always come up immediately.
Immediately comes up over the appetizer.
No, it's come up a few times and it hasn't been an issue.
But everybody's got scars.
I think that people see what they see in me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I must be a little cute, and they, I think some younger guys and some older guys are attracted to that. But beyond that, I think they see somebody who loves life and who has fun and who is an optimist and who, finds the joy. What
in your book, not to be a spoiler about it, is there anything in your book that you're like, I thought that at the time and I got that wrong? I say that about my book all the time. I don't agree with 70% of it looking back, which is why it scares me to write another book.
I don't think that there's like wrong or right when we're talking about like
when you're talking about memoir, it probably is. It is
things
what it
that
is.
you think or things that you decide. I
mean, your interpretation of what
Yeah.
happened. Looking back, you're like, I might have misjudged that scene that way.
You know, I took 15 years to write that book, so I'm really, really happy with that book. I think that I go through it in present tense, so you're experiencing it as I experienced it. And so, yes, my interpretation looking back is different, but I tried to really be in that moment. And I think you learn everything that you've gone through brings you to exactly where you are right now. And exactly where you are right now is exactly where you're meant to be. And
for the old Jackie O line that you marry the first time for love, the second time for money, and the third time for companionship.
I have never married for money. I've never been good at that part. I don't know what my problem is. It'd be nice to marry for money.
But is there something now, you admitted that you needed, you were a love addict, you needed validation, you needed approval, you needed all those things. What do you believe you need now in marriage for?
Honestly, right now, I'm not even divorced yet. Yeah. I do not need anything from anybody else right now. Honestly, I really
It's tough to date that way.
I need to and I'm not looking to date.
You're looking to date.
I'm telling you, Brian, I'm not. I
well,
went on
when
the
you
apps.
do look to date, you have to. The women who run into the biggest trouble are the ones who constantly either say out loud or say to themselves, "I don't need anything from anybody," because we all need either a little or a lot of things or different things from lots of people. That's what brings us together. So you have to decide moving in when the time.
If and when I am ready for a relationship, which I'm not now, which is what I was trying to say. I told you I would like to share my life with somebody. I'd like to do life with somebody. I enjoy having someone to come home to. I enjoy that companionship. I enjoy the connection. I enjoy having someone who lights up when they see me. I enjoy having somebody
and just
who
that sounds like
physically
a
loves
golden
me.
retriever. Yeah, but that does sound healthier. That's a healthy description of what.
But what I was trying to say is I'm not quite there yet. I really need some time alone. I think it's important that I enjoy being alone. But to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that I can't date, because dating isn't necessarily looking for a mate, a lifelong mate. I'm really not looking for that right now. I mean, if I find it, great. But I want to I just like meeting people and connecting with people and having fun. And you do kind of need that connection.
And that's the biggest difference between how you dated at 24 or 28 or 35 or whatever. What's the longest you've ever been single?
I mean, I was single the first 6 years of my life.
I know, but I don't count 7-year-old single as the same. So from 25 to 49, what's the longest period that you have not
That's
been in a
actually a question I haven't really thought about, but we're
going to do the math right now. Let's think about it.
When I was younger, I didn't have a lot of serious relationships, and that's one of the reasons why I married one of the first guys that I had a serious relationship with. So I had a boyfriend in college. I had a lot of ones that didn't work out. Most of the time, I felt very frustrated. I felt like the guys that I liked didn't like me back, and the ones that liked me, I didn't like. It was always I didn't have a great start.
Why it's hard.
A great start.
Yeah.
I didn't have a great start with the love and lust and like figuring all that out. But so I think I settled, or I latched on to the first serious relationship. He took care of me. He made me feel cared for, and I didn't have an opportunity because we were living in New York City. Mm-hmm. We moved in together. I was sick. I was in the hospital, and he moved all my stuff in, and we moved in together for financial reasons, and I never had an opportunity to sit back and examine whether that actually was the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. Mm-hmm. And if I had, I would have realized, no, you know what? We had some things in common. He was good in certain ways, but he wasn't my forever person. The second time, I latched on to this idea of like this perfect, all-American boy, this Christian, it was a very holistic, very beautiful, wholesome, life that I thought I wanted. But that wasn't 100% me either.
Well, not too many people go from J-date to a Christian marriage.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's interesting.
That is, wait, you got to read the book. You got to read the book. Yeah. And then the third time I was latching on to somebody from my past, somebody from high school who, realized he should have made the better choice and gone for me instead of my best friend in high school.
Right.
And that was exciting and cool. And there was a shared history there.
Yeah.
And also an excitement. And we were both very passionate and fiery. And there's all kinds of reasons why our marriage did not work.
Right.
But
now, what is it like to be married, first married to, and second, divorcing somebody who is literally an open book?
Well, you'll have to ask him.
Well, you must have asked him, are you comfortable? You wrote the book in the middle of your third marriage?
Yeah, we just talked last night actually, and he told me, he's like, yeah, I was so supportive and so good because he's very outgoing and, like me, kind of likes the attention and, doesn't mind that, unlike my ex. So anyway, he told me, he's like, it's funny. I was so supportive of it, but it's really hard now. And I just wrote a piece on my website, DanielleTantone.com, called A Couch in the Kitchen. And it's basically about now. It's about a little bit about the dating and the, the divorce and everything. And he gave it his blessing. I was hesitant to let him read it. He read it. It was very hard for him to read, and then he gave it his blessing. But then after I posted it and shared it, he said that was, it was very hard for him.
He was with you during your cancer battle?
He was, and he was a great supporter. He never made me feel anything less than beautiful.
Because there's something to be, we had a woman on our podcast a couple of years ago, Romy Reitman, who went through a cancer battle, and it made her two things. It made her incredibly grateful to have the spouse that she had, and also incredibly aware that this is not the person she wanted to be with once she beat this cancer.
That's interesting.
And that is a hard thing to be both grateful and then, thank you, I'm out of here.
Yeah. One thing I said about my soon-to-be ex recently was that he is an amazing person to have in the highs and lows of life. Like, he was recently with me at the deathbed of a friend who was dying, and he can be in those moments. And he cries tears of joy when he sees me sing. I sang to him at our wedding. He's amazing at those moments. He can have such empathy and joy and so much support. But our everyday interactions with each other were where we fought all the time. We couldn't resolve conflict. We couldn't, we just lost our trust for each other. It was a deeper thing. So it was but he was awesome with the breast cancer.
Are you more, after going through about to be 3 divorces, are you more confident in your ability to be a good partner moving forward because you have examined this so carefully?
I think so. And I think there's still some examination to do. I think, like I said, I listened to your podcast episode, and it kind of reminded me that, even though I've done a lot of work, and even though I wrote a whole book about it, there's still some things that are coming up even in this time that I'm like, that's interesting. I might want to talk to somebody about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's so easy to say like, oh, I don't need that. We
are all works in progress. We are all special needs children.
Yeah.
Now,
so wait, that is the subtitle. My book's called Piece of Work, but the subtitle is We're All a Piece of Work, a Work in Progress, and a Work of Art. All at the same time.
I like that. Well, because you have apparently listened to this podcast before, you know that we play something called Worst Date or First Date. So you have to either give our audience and me the worst date you've ever been on, or the greatest first date you've been on, your choice.
Oh my gosh. This is hard. I didn't get all the way to the end of the episode, so I'm not prepared for this. Worst date or first date?
So a terrible date or a really good first date?
Oh, I wish I had prepared.
I don't want you to prepare.
You know what? I'll just have to stick with, because we're talking about my soon-to-be ex, Mike. We got to have a second first date because we went on our first date. We went to a cotillion in high school, where a dance.
Yeah.
We mostly went as friends. But 20 some years later, we had reconnected on Facebook, and I had flown out to Nashville to see him. He was living there at the time. We both grew up here in Arizona, went to high school. So 20 years later, I flew out to Nashville. And so our second first date, we'll go with that as the best date. We went out to dinner. I think we had sushi, and then we went to a local brew house and saw his friend's band play. And, there's a picture of us that's like the best picture we've ever taken. And it was just a great second first date.
That's a nice, isn't it nice looking back?
And that picture was in last week. There was a Wall Street Journal article where we were featured in about divorcing couples living together because of the housing market. And they used that picture, and it was like kind of like bittersweet.
It wasn't so bad after all.
It's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Almost exactly.
That is sweet. And that's not as uncommon as you think, is that when people go through this, let me call that guy from high school, because a lot of people are coming back out of those second and third marriages, and that's a lot of the pool. All right. Tell everybody how they can find you and your book and your podcast and all that.
The book is called Piece of Work, a Memoir. We're all a piece of work, a work in progress, and a work of art, by Danielle Tantone. It's on Amazon. It's available in Audible. It's read by me. It's an ebook and softcover and hardcover. My website is danielletantone.com. That's DANIELLE, T as in Tom, AN as in Nancy, TONE.com. All my social medias are also at Danielle Tantone. And my podcast, which is also hosted by Pod Populi, is Piece of Work with Danielle Tantone. So it's on all the podcast platforms.
See, this wasn't so bad, right?
No, it's fun. Thank you.
Easier than marriage. Thank you. As far as us, like, share, follow, please review, not just this podcast, but Piece of Work. Your reviews mean a lot in the podcasting ecosystem. Shoot us an email, greatlovedebate@gmail.com. If you got thoughts, questions, comments about your fourth or fifth marriage or anything else. Also, we are about to close the submissions. We're letting you guys once again give us the best and worst cities in America, your candidates for which date. We're going to have those lists coming out very, very soon. This is the second year in a row I've done it. I've done the worst this way. For the first, 9 years of this podcast, I did them all myself based on this is the list
Your
and
own
that's
experience?
it. No, based on what I absorbed touring the country. I have not toured nearly as much in this year, 2023, as I did in the prior 10 years. That being said, the 11th season of the Great Love Debate World Tour live kicks off with our 10th anniversary show. So the 10th year goes into the 11th. Do the math on that. Our 10th anniversary show is February something. I don't know, 6th, I think. Go to greatlovedebate.com. It's at the Boca Black Box Center for the Arts live. We got a great lineup. Tickets are on sale, bocablackbox.com or greatlovedebate.com. And it's going to be really fun because, as always, at the Great Love Debate, we never stop making love. See you next time.